Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really fascinating and often debated topic within the Catholic faith. We're looking at one of those stories where belief, evidence, and official church declarations kind of collide. And to help us navigate this, we've got 5 key questions that really frame the whole issue. Think of it as our map for today. Okay, first, what's really going on when a church investigation says lack of proof, but specifically doesn't say demonic? What's that distinction actually mean? Second, is it even possible for a big church decision to be invalid if the people making it felt, forced or pressured? Third, if you have supposed miraculous evidence like rose petals with actual sacred images on them and the order comes down to burn them, what does that signal about the search for truth? Fourth, how do you square an official condemnation with the fact that holy, respected bishops, people who were right there, actually supported the events? And finally, can you have genuine miracles, real conversions, and a really vibrant devotion that keeps going for decades, even when there's an official decree against where it all started?
Those are some heavy questions, and they really get to the heart of discerning these kinds of things in the church. Today, we're zeroing in on the Lipa Apparitions. These supposedly began back on September 12, 1948, in Batangas in the Philippines. It's a story that, well, a lot of people find incredibly compelling, but it's definitely stirred up a lot of official controversy over the years.
Right. And the lens we're using today, our main source, is an online article titled 20 Reasons I Believe in the Lipa Apparitions Despite Vatican Decrees. So our mission is basically to unpack his reasons, explore the arguments he makes, and just try to understand the specific viewpoint the author's putting forward here. It's really about his take on faith versus official judgment.
And just a quick note, if you want the full picture, all the details he presents,
Yeah.
you really should check out the original article. It's over at www.epistles.online. Definitely worth a read for the full context.
Okay, let's get into it. So that initial church verdict, you hear church judgment against it, and you might think case closed, declared false or evil, but Lipa. Yeah, it wasn't quite like that, was it?
No, that's a really crucial point the author makes. The wording is key. The official statement only said the apparitions lacked proof of the supernatural. It specifically didn't condemn them as demonic. So it wasn't saying this is fake or this is evil. It was more like an unproven status. Reason number one, basically.
Unproven. Okay, so what's the practical difference there? Does that leave the door open for belief? Because some critics do call it demonic, don't they?
It does leave the door open, technically. Unproven isn't the same as condemned. It allows for personal belief, especially if people see good things coming from it, good fruits. When critics jump to calling it demonic, they're actually going further than the official 1951 statement did.
Yeah.
That creates tension, definitely.
And the investigation itself, you'd think for something this big, there'd be teams of experts, maybe scientists, right? But the author argues it wasn't that thorough.
Yeah, he points out that the negative judgment seems to trace back mostly to one person, Archbishop Egidio Vagnazzi. He was the papal nuncio, the Pope's representative, in 1951. And apparently, Vagnazzi was already skeptical, maybe even unfavorable towards the whole thing beforehand. So his view heavily influenced the outcome. That's the author's reason, too.
One person's view driving it. That leads to the next point, about coercion.
Right, this is a big one. Reason 3 in the article. Historical accounts, the author says, suggest that many Filipino bishops felt forced to sign the decree against Lipa. Some apparently signed with tears and fear. Now, if that's true, if their signatures weren't given freely, church law, specifically Canon 124, says acts performed under duress can be invalid.
Invalid. Wow. So the whole basis of the condemnation could be shaky if that pressure element is true.
Potentially, yes. A judgment needs free assent to be valid according to canon law. If it was coerced, its legitimacy is definitely questionable.
And how were the actual people involved treated? The visionary Teresita Castillo?
She was just a young postulant, right? A novice nun.
Yeah.
Exactly. And according to the author, reason 4, instead of getting gentle guidance or careful investigation, she faced punishment and humiliation.
That doesn't sound like seeking the truth.
No, it doesn't. And it wasn't just her. Mother Cecilia Jesus, the prioress, her superior, who actually supported Teresita and believed in the events, she was also punished and sent away. Reason 5. The author argues this suggests the authorities were more interested in silence, not truth. Shut it down quickly.
Which brings us to that detail about the rose petals. This one. It's pretty stunning. Thousands of petals, supposedly falling from heaven, some with images.
Yeah, that's the claim. Rose petals showering down, and many reportedly had tiny, clear, sacred images pressed into the very veins of the flowers. Incredible detail.
And the church authorities ordered them.
Burned.
Burned. Thousands of them. That's reason 6. Instead of collecting them, studying them, the order was destruction.
But people saved some, right? The author calls them living witnesses. Many faithful apparently couldn't bring themselves to destroy them and kept them hidden. So these petals still exist today, passed down through families, acting as physical reminders.
It's such a contrast to places like Lourdes or Fatima, where the church often supported the growth of devotion.
Right. Reason 7. Those sites grew with clergy cooperation, sometimes cautiously, but they grew. Lipa was condemned quickly, decisively. The author argues this created a climate where bishops became afraid to promote it, even though hundreds of thousands of Filipinos had already visited and believed before that 1951 decree hit.
Okay, so that's the initial situation: controversy, suppression, questions about the process. But faith did endure. What about the evidence for authenticity that the author presents?
Well, a key point for him is Teresita Castillo herself, reason 8. He emphasizes she never fought against the church. Even after the condemnation, she lived quiet life, obedient and humble. She didn't try to make money from it, didn't seek fame. He sees that humility and obedience, even when things went against her, as a mark of sincerity you'd expect from a genuine visionary.
That is compelling. And what about those bishops who were there and did believe?
That's another powerful argument. Reason 9. Bishop Alfredo Versosa and his auxiliary Bishop Alfredo Aviar. Both were present during the events and supported the apparitions. Importantly, both are now recognized by the Church as venerable. Their lives were judged to have heroic virtue. So their belief carries significant weight, the author argues. Why would these holy men believe if it were fraudulent?
Venerable.
No.
Wow, that's a serious stamp of approval on their personal holiness. And there was hidden evidence, too, a journal.
Yes, this is reason 11. Relatively recently, the hidden journal of Father Angel de Blas surfaced. He was involved in the investigation, apparently, and his journal shows he actually believed Teresita was honest and that the events leaned towards being supernatural. This support was effectively buried for decades. Finding it adds another layer, suggesting the official verdict wasn't the whole story.
So suppressed evidence, support from holy figures. What about the actual messages received? Were they doctrinally sound?
Completely. Reason 19 highlights this. The messages of Lipa are all Catholic. They call for prayer, penance, sacrifice, devotion to Mary who leads to Jesus. Standard Catholic stuff. There's no heresy, no false teaching. The author argues this purity of the message points to its divine origin. If it were false or demonic, you'd expect weird doctrines or errors.
Right, that makes sense. The content needs to align. Okay, let's shift to the lasting impact. Are there ongoing signs or respected figures who came to believe later on?
Definitely. The author mentions, reason 10, people like June Keithley, a very well-known Filipino journalist, and also Gerard Timmler III, who's now the Master General of the Dominicans, a huge position. These are serious, respected individuals who studied the facts deeply and became convinced or at least held a favorable view of Lipa's authenticity. It shows the belief isn't just simple piety. It has intellectual backing, too.
And what about ongoing phenomena? Miracles, conversions, are those still reported?
Yes. The author emphasizes the ongoing miracles and conversions linked to praying to Our Lady Mediatrix of all grace. Reason 12. People report finding peace, strength, and answered petitions, even today. He argues this continuous stream of grace, these positive spiritual fruits happening decades later, simply cannot be explained by fraud or a demonic source. Good trees bear good fruit, essentially.
And the devotion itself, it's still flourishing.
Remarkably so. Reason 15 points to the flourishing of devotion wherever the image of Mary Mediatrix is venerated. Parishes, cathedrals, they become full of prayer. He even quotes Gamaliel from the Acts of the Apostles. If it's not of God, it will perish. The fact that Lipa devotion hasn't perished, but thrives despite opposition, suggests divine origin to him.
That persistence is powerful. Now, Archbishop Ramon Argo, he took a very public, courageous stand, didn't he?
He did. He's highlighted in Reason 16 as the only prelate who made a deep and thorough study of Lipa in recent times. And based on his study, he formally declared it worthy of belief in 2016.
But that didn't end well for him, career-wise.
No. Soon after his declaration, he was removed from his post as Archbishop of Lipa. Many, including the author, interpreted this as a direct consequence, a punishment for his favorable stance on the apparitions.
So his situation becomes almost another piece of evidence for the author, suggesting the powers that be were still suppressing it?
That's certainly how the author frames it. His courage and the apparent repercussions underscore the ongoing sensitivity and conflict surrounding Lipa.
And there's one more localized sign mentioned, something about an image exuding oil.
Yes, Reason 17. An image of the Mediatrix, owned by a family not far from the Lipa convent, has apparently been exuding oil for years. It's not an official church-approved miracle, but for believers in the area, it's seen as a sign of Our Lady's continued presence and blessing related to Lipa.
It all comes back to the fruits, doesn't it? The author concludes, reason 20, that the clearest proof is always the fruit, and that devotion to Mary Mediatrix has consistently brought people closer to God since 1948. That's his ultimate validation. Okay, but there is opposition. People strongly argue against Lipa. How does the author address the critics?
He tackles that directly. One point, reason 13, concerns exorcists. Apparently, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines issued a pastoral letter in 2018 asking exorcists not to call Lipa demonic, respecting the original lack of proof verdict. Yet, the author says, some exorcists openly continue to do so. He sees this as disobedience on their part, which weakens their claim of authority when they criticize Lipa believers for supposed disobedience.
Interesting point about consistency. What about the arguments themselves? Does he find them convincing?
He generally finds them weak, reason 14. Often, he says, critics just fall back on Rome already spoken, without engaging with the complexities or the evidence he's presented. He suggests some opposition might stem from pride or loyalty to colleagues involved in the initial condemnations rather than careful reasoning.
And this ties into the idea of fearful church leaders.
Yes, reason 18. He talks about leaders who just echo Rome without question, possibly fearing they'll lose favor or petition if they rock the boat. He connects this perceived lack of courage to reactions around other controversial issues too, like the document Fiducia Supplicans. The core idea is that some leaders avoid revisiting Lipa, not because of the evidence, but out of fear.
So, the author's final stance on questioning the verdict. It's not about rebellion.
Not at all. He frames it as love for the church. He says to question the Lipa verdict is not to disobey the church. It is to love the church enough to ask her leaders to correct their errors. For him, the real disobedience is refusing to engage with the truth, ignoring the pain of the oppressed, like Teresita, and upholding a judgment he believes was born from coercion and concealment. It's a call for truth and reconciliation, really.
Wow. We've definitely journeyed through a complex landscape today. Faith, official rulings, personal stories, enduring devotion, all wrapped up in the Lipa apparitions seen through the eyes of this one author.
It really does leave you thinking, doesn't it? Lipa forces us to ask how we, individually and as church, handle these situations where official statements conflict with personal experience or observe spiritual fruits. How do you balance obedience with seeking truth? What aspect of this whole saga stands out most to you?
Definitely a lot to ponder. And remember, we've really just touched on the arguments presented in the source article. For the full, detailed perspective, please do visit www.epistles.online. Epistles, the site itself, is a great resource if you're looking for Catholic commentary that tries to strike a balance. It's not modernist, not ultra-traditionalist. The author tackles challenging issues head-on. He openly confronts things like clericalism, liberalism, modernism, things he sees as harming the faith. His goal seems to be bringing clarity and fighting for truth within the church. If you find his work valuable, we warmly invite you to support the apostolate. You can do that through prayers, sharing the articles, or subscribing. Every bit helps keep the mission going and freely available. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.